You have started, sir.
Good afternoon, doctors. Thank you for joining this webinar from DG Neuro, a digital initiative of Health and Youth Therapeutics. Health and Youth Therapeutics is in joint venture with New Link Company Limited, Japan. We have great pleasure in carrying this webinar, and we thank Dr. Puranik sir for allowing us to carry this webinar. Health and You has a vision to fulfill unmet medical needs, the unmet medical needs of doctors and patients. So therefore, we always launch innovative new products for the first time in India, like the first amitriptyline plus mecobalamin combination, Amnurite, in 5 milligram, 10 milligram and 25 milligram strength for migraine and for neuropathy. We are the only injection of mecobalamin made in Japan. We imported from Japan to give you highest quality. We were the first one to combine amitriptyline plus propranolol SR for migraine. When headache is not controlled by one drug, you need to combine two drugs. So this is a combination Amnurite Beta, 520 ER and 1040 ER. We are the first one to launch first pharmacological combination for neuropathic pain, where two neuroanalysis is combined together. So pregabalin is made to act for 24 hours by making it in a sustained release form to match pharmacokinetic profile of amitriptyline, that is Amnurite P. It is pharmacological. We have many more products that we are launching, and the one product that we launched recently was Adclobaz. Clobazam, first time in 2.5 milligram strength for flexibility and control in epilepsy, in febrile seizures. And we are about to launch now, once the COVID-19 is over, vitamin therapy for migraine, first time in India. Many more with your suggestions and with your support. We are always here to fulfill unmet medical needs. Now I have great pleasure in handing over the session to Dr. Nipun Puranik, who is our coordinator for today. Dr. Nipun is a young and dynamic neurophysician, MD, DM Neurology. He's a consultant neurologist, and he's also an intervention stroke specialist in a well-known corporate hospital, Apollo Hospital in Indore. So Dr. Puranik, Nipun Puranik, over to you for coordination of this session. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for organizing this Zoom session. So this is the, how many participants have joined till now?
I think the tally is about 460 plus.
Okay, right. So hi to everyone. I would like to, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce my dad and my mentor, Dr. Apur Puranik. I don't think he needs any introduction. And we all know his love, zeal, and passion for the field of aphasia. And without wasting much time, I would like my dad to start over this Zoom session. And I hope it's of a great benefit to all the listeners.
Good afternoon, everybody. And my thanks to Health and You and DG Neuro for giving me this opportunity. Aphasia is a subject which is very close to my heart. And getting this opportunity, particularly during these troubled corona times, with the help of the new technology of webinars, I'm so glad that I'm able to talk to hundreds of neurologists and other doctors. Here are some of the abbreviations which will be commonly used in the two talks today and tomorrow. And as an introduction, here are a few philosophical sentences. It is difficult to find an individual who is not interested in language. Language is not a human invention like a wheel, but it is a complex, specialized skill which emerges spontaneously without any conscious effort, without any formal training. Scientists have given many attributes to language, like a psychological faculty, a computational module, a mental organ, a neural subsystem. But the favorite expression from as early as Charles Darwin and as recent as Steven Pinker is that language is an instinctive tendency to acquire an art and skill. We, the neurologists, internists, and SLPs, are occupying front seats as well as lead roles in the stage in this grand opera of language. Why? Because we care for persons struggling to regain their competence after a stroke or any brain pathology, and we cannot escape our medical and humanitarian responsibility of assessing in great detail what it means to suffer from aphasia, and also being a fellow traveler in the long, arduous journey of therapy and rehabilitation. I know it's a challenge to have a mixed audience. The speech language pathologists are the core people who will deal with persons with aphasia in a great detail, while the neurologists, neurosurgeons, and internists will not be interested in as much detail, and I have to balance out their interests, and I will try. The goals of my presentation are to arouse interest, to revise some old knowledge, to provide some new information, and to provide new perspectives. I hope that at the end of the presentations today and tomorrow, a busy and less interested clinician will know and would like to do at least some bare minimum for persons with aphasia. And a clinician with greater interest in the subject will become more motivated and informed about doing better assessment and diagnosis and management. The subject of aphasia is important because of high disease burden. Amongst the stroke survivors, about 25% would have aphasia as a long-term morbidity and disability, and it is twice that of Parkinsonism. What is most ironical is the treatment gap, by which we mean so much can be done and yet it is not being done. We hope to reduce the treatment gap. So the community burden of aphasia and related disorders of speech and communication involves not only the 25% of stroke survivors, but also 5 to 10% of head injury in all type of dementias. There is a variable impairment of language function whose assessment and therapy has to be undertaken apart from other cognitive ailments or impairments. In the pediatric age group, the developmental disorders like mental retardation, learning disabilities also have a linguistic or language component whose assessment and rehabilitation shares some of the features with adult disorders. I would not go into the details of anatomy of aphasia. There have been major revisions in our understanding of language organization in brain because of advances in structural and functional neuroanatomy in healthy as well as in persons with disease. And traditionally, we have been considering the three axes for the anatomical substrate of aphasia. One is the Sylvian fissure, and the areas around the Sylvian fissure are known as Sylvian areas, and they include Broca's area, Wernicke's area, and the arcuate fasciculus. These are the core language areas for speech function and for aphasia syndromes. And outside this circle, we have perisylvian areas, which is responsible for transcortical motor, anomic, transcortical sensory, and other type of aphasias. Another anatomical axis for understanding the language is Rolandic sulcus or central sulcus. And here we keep anterior and posterior divisions. The anterior part is producing Broca's aphasia, transcortical motor aphasia. The posterior part lesions will produce Wernicke's, anomic, and transcortical sensory and mixed aphasias. And the third axis is cortical versus subcortical on the axial axis. This is the quadrilateral, famous quadrilateral of Pierre-Maris, and there are subcortical aphasias also, while aphasias in general are predominantly cortical. It is said that the classical aphasia syndromes are an artifact of angioanatomical territories. The Broca's aphasia because of anterior branch of MCA. Wernicke's aphasia, posterior branch of MCA. Global aphasia, the main ICA, the main stem of MCA. Conduction aphasia, inferior branch of MCA. Transcortical motor, the superior branch of MCA, or ACA sometimes, ICA plus ACA, and so on. Aphasia also occurs in non-stroke pathologies like TBI and dementia with different clinical profile, which doesn't conform to the classical syndromes and different clinico-anatomical correlations. Particularly, there have been many studies of language dysfunction in last 2 decades in frontotemporal dementias, which have led to major conceptual advances about the language organization in human brain. I will not go into those details. I was just thinking, should I discuss the classical aphasia syndromes with this audience or not? It would have saved me a few minutes. Whatever they are worth, I will briefly enumerate them. Broca's aphasia, inferior frontal gyrus, non-fluent speech, agrammatic speech, auditory comprehension relatively preserved, repetition as severely affected as fluency, naming as severely affected as fluency. That is the Broca's aphasia. Wernicke's area, superior temporal gyrus, mainly receptive aphasia, auditory comprehension severely affected. Fluency is preserved, but the speech is jargon with lot of paraphasias, and repetition and naming are as severely affected as the comprehension. The global aphasia is a combination of Broca's and Wernicke, and here motor and sensory, both aspects are severely affected. Conduction aphasia is with the arcuate fasciculus, and here fluency is also slightly reduced, auditory comprehension is also slightly reduced, but what is more severely affected is repetition. Very paradoxical. A person may repeat whatever he or she is listening, but neither may be understand nor may be able to generate it in a normal manner, except during repetition. In transcortical motor, it is somewhat like Broca's, but with one difference, that in Broca's, repetition was affected. Here it is relatively preserved. And so is the case with transcortical sensory. It resembles Wernicke's, but again, the same caveat, repetition is relatively preserved as compared to Wernicke's. And anomic, here mainly the naming function is affected, while others are relatively preserved. That was with the angular gyrus. And here in the splenium and the occipital cortex on the dominant side, we have alexia without agraphia. So these are the classical aphasia syndromes. Apart from these syndromes, the spectrum of aphasia also includes severity spectrum ranging from very mild to very severe. Aphasias can be either predominantly motor and efferent or predominantly sensory and afferent. They can affect the verbal mode of communication, that is the way we talk to each other and listen. It can affect the written mode of communication, that is reading and writing, and it can affect the sign language in deaf mute. They also have typical aphasic semiology, the sign language people. It can affect articulation, sometimes, not always. Particularly the non-fluent aphasias, anteriorly placed lesions may affect articulation. However, you must remember that dysarthria can occur in conditions other than aphasia also, without any language involvement. When we describe the spectrum of aphasia, we also talk of linguistic aspects. By phonology, we mean the sound patterns. By semantics, we mean the meaning of words and the lexicon or the dictionary. By syntax, we mean the sentence formation and grammatical rules. And by discourse, we mean more than one sentence. It's a combination of many sentences, a paragraph or a monologue. We also pay attention to associated higher mental functions, because aphasia is not a pure disorder of language. The other cognitive functions are also affected. How do we assess aphasia? The clinical assessment, it is called as batteries. Sometimes, particularly the internists and the neurologists, they will be doing their assessment in an ad hoc manner. That is not ideal. It may be okay for us, but for SLPs, they should have standardized and validated batteries. They are essential for publication, for research, and also planning a comprehensive and intensive therapy for a person with aphasia. The standardized batteries are basically refinements of our ad hoc batteries, but they have been subjected to rigorous testing based on psychometric data based on psychometric requirements for reliability and validity, which are very difficult to meet. Many international aphasia batteries have been translated and adopted into Indian languages. Some of them have been published and validated, but many have not been. And this is not a very happy situation. We need to improve upon that. The current popular test batteries include the clinical bedside examination, which is unstructured and ad hoc, and I will be coming to that in a minute. There are some screening tests. There are comprehensive batteries. There are batteries for some specific aspect of language function, like the naming, Boston naming test, token test for comprehension at sentence level, and test for reading and writing. So there are large variety, and there are tests based on cognitive neuropsychological approach known as PALPA and many more. So to begin with, short test, aphasia screening test, which is the demand from internists and neurologists and neurosurgeons. They want just to think something which they can do in 5 to 10 minutes. Of course, everybody needs it as a stepping stone for doing more comprehensive assessment. One very popular is FAST, Franchise Aphasia Screening Test by Pamela Enderby from UK. I tried to make a Hindi aphasia screening indoor test HACCP based on FAST, but subsequently a better version is coming for Indian adaptation of FAST as a screening tool by the ICMR Neurocognitive Toolbox Consortium, and I'm also one of the authors on that. Another question which has been put to me is ultra short bedside assessment, particularly in ICU setting. Now that we know that stroke management is very time sensitive, there is a window of 3 to 4.5 or 6 hours for intervention in acute stroke. And it is known that sometimes persons can present with aphasia without any hemiparesis or mild hemiparesis or mild facial asymmetry. And these patients may be confused with delirium or acute confusional state or psychosis. So how not to miss aphasia in ICU? Well, the clinician has to listen to the patient as a part of history, look for articulation, word finding, improper sentences, incomplete description of his own illness, use of wrong words. The clinician should ask the patient to repeat a few uncommon and slightly difficult phrases to repeat. Now keep them ready in your mobile phone. It won't come to your mind immediately. Ask the patient to obey a couple of slightly unusual two-step command, not a simple command like show your tongue. So keep these unusual commands ready in your smartphone. Ask the patient to name a few uncommon objects around you or images of those objects in a folder on your phone. So I think these tests can be done in 2 minutes in ICU setting. The spectrum of aphasia also includes severity. Franchise aphasia screening test has a score of 30, and lower the score, more severe is the aphasia. The Western aphasia battery has aphasia quotient, and Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination has this severity scale ranging from grade 0 to grade 5, grade 0 being no usable speech or auditory comprehension, and grade 5 meaning minimal discernible handicap, which is mainly subjective and not obvious to other people. There are no shortcuts in aphasia assessment. We have to devote time. It is labor intensive, it is time intensive. A comprehensive profiling is essential with a lot of expertise and experience. It is necessary for proper diagnosis and for therapeutic planning. And SLPs are primarily suited for this, but neurologists should also pitch in along with clinical neuropsychologists. How brief and how detailed? A routine clinical assessment in the bedside or office can be done in 5 to 10 minutes, but the longer assessment would take about 45 minutes and may not be one session. There are no shortcuts. What you need is motivation. You need drill and practice, or as in music they call riyaz, or like an athlete. If someone has to excel in 100-meter run, he has to do the running every day and then improve his time. Similarly, if a clinician is doing the examination daily, repeatedly, his time will improve. We can carry a set of cards, of pictures and objects in our bag. We can carry all those images on our smartphone. If those neurologists who have a clinical assistant in their OPD or in their ward, they can train their assistant in doing a screening examination, and we can train the caregiver of a person with aphasia to help in follow-up assessments. And of course, the neurologist and neurosurgeons and internists should team up with an SLP and a clinical neuropsychologist on a long-term basis. We should also carry a printed scoring pro forma. So whenever we are doing a clinical examination, we should have this type of 2-column chart. What was the target word which was expected from the patient during naming and repetition and reading aloud and all those, and what was the patient's response, because otherwise we are going to forget. So if you keep this pro forma ready, that will save you time. When we do a proper assessment of language function, we begin with educational status, working status, language proficiency, including multilingualism, and handedness. The handedness and dominance is well known to this audience. 98% of the people, 90% of the people are right-hander and 10% are non-right-hander. 98% of the right-handers have the left hemisphere as dominant for language. So the crossed aphasia occurs in 2%. Amongst the non-right-handers, again it is the left hemisphere which is dominant in about 50 to 60%. In children, there is an equipotentiality between both hemispheres for the development of language function up to the age of 6 to 7 years. So when assessing the handedness, it is not enough to ask only the two functions, the writing and the eating, because many of us have been forced by our parents to write and to eat with the right hand while inherently we were left-hander. So the other questions are written here, and out of these 10 questions, you can calculate the handedness quotient. For me, I do all 10 with my right hand. So it will become 10 minus 0 divided by 10, that is 1 multiplied by 100. So I'm 100% right-hander. Multilingualism has to be taken care of. It's an exceptional opportunity to India, in our country, because we can explore the effect of same lesion in a person who speaks structurally distinct languages. It poses a special challenge. It becomes imperative to assess the language function in both the or 3 languages. The clinical profile in 2 languages may differ, and it is important not only for clinical purpose, but also for theoretical and research purpose, and also for therapeutic planning. What are the symptomatology of aphasia? Patients can be brought to us with certain symptoms. They can be brought to us with mutism, not talking at all. They can be brought to us with difficulty in speaking, with reduced speed of talking, non-fluency. They can be brought to us with groping for words and not finding the word, anomia. They can come with phonemic paraphasia, in which they are uttering a word different from the intended word with respect to a sound structure, or when it differs in semantic category, then we call it semantic paraphasia, or it could be jargon. Patients come to us with the symptom of total jargon. Whole speech is totally ununderstandable, or it could be highly restricted to a consonant vowel recurring utterance, CV recurring utterance, like the famous patient of Paul Broca, who was left with the only sound was ta, 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 so that he was called Mr. Ta. The patients with aphasia can have circumlocution when, because of not finding the word, they can describe the thing in a roundabout manner, and they may be struck up with perseverance, giving the same answer again and again and again and again in different contexts. So many symptoms can occur with which the patients can be brought to us. The comprehensive batteries, which examine the speech function in greater detail, the most popular ones are Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination, which I have adopted in my clinic in Hindi. In India as a whole, Western Aphasia battery is very popular. It's a very good battery. Its versions in Indian languages are available. They are necessary for proper diagnosis, syndromic classification, and labeling, and they may take from 30 to 45 minutes for a good assessment. PALPA is a much more comprehensive assessment, which is not routinely done. The full form is Psycholinguistic Assessment of Language Processing in Aphasia. It's a very elaborate and extensive protocol to create fine-grained profile about a few or many aspects of a speech language function, including reading and writing with the help of a plethora of subtests. And then there are tests for communication in day-to-day life, functional communication profile. So these are known as comprehensive test batteries for aphasia. The ones which I have created at Indore in Hindi are HACIT for screening, HABIT for brief test, HAFIT for full test, and HRWIT for reading and writing in Hindi. The clinical examination for aphasia includes auditory comprehension, articulation, fluency, repetition, naming, reading, and writing, and I will dwell upon them for a few minutes. Ideally, before planning any aphasia assessment or before creating a good adaptation or an original test battery, the clinician should create, compile, and carry a library of pictures and words and sentences. We call them stimuli for the assessment of aphasia. And these stimuli, pictures and words and sentences, cannot be chosen randomly. We must pay attention to frequency, word frequency, how commonly they are spoken in society. Imageability, whether that word creates an image or not. What is the pronunciability? Coming to the noun, which semantic category they are belonging, which type of noun they are. Coming to verbs, whether they are transitive and intransitive, whether it take one object or more than one object, how many syllables are there, and all this has to be standardized with normative data from healthy volunteers. And this is what Pinky Singh and I did in a paper to be published in a forthcoming supplement of Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology. It's not easy to create this picture library. A lot of hard work goes into it. And what do? We created culturally appropriate stimuli for cognitive neuropsychology based treatment known as intensive language action therapy. And we had 303 words and their pictures. And these were given to healthy college going students. And we asked them, is this picture, what name comes to your mind? Is the name agreement good? Is the picture familiar? Is the image is good? How complex is the visual image? And based on this normative data, and these pictures were created by an artist, a senior artist at Indore. We can't copy from Google because there are copyright issues. So this work, so much work goes in development of stimuli for the assessment of aphasia. And once we create this picture library, many people have done in India. Annamma and Mathuranath did in Malayalam, and Wonderword pictures have been done in many languages all over the world. And we were also guided by the previous work. Once we create a public picture library, it is useful in auditory comprehension, naming, word picture making, sentence picture making, sorting of the pictures into semantic categories, picture sequence for story and discourse, and sentence construction. So these are the pictures, the verbs, the nouns, more nouns, action verbs, more action verbs, a scene. This is for picture description. So many things are going on. There are so many nouns and so many verbs in this picture. And this is the famous cookie theft scene from Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination. I simply asked my artist to change that sari for the lady. And this is a scene, a street scene. Now, the purpose of these type of scenes is to stimulate a person with aphasia to speak, to give us a narrative sample, to speak few sentences so that we can do our assessment on the spoken verbal sample of the speech. And this home picture. So showing all these pictures to the person with aphasia, we test verbal expression and fluency. And what do we look at it? We look at articulation, how many words and sentences are being spoken, how many words per sentence or per phrase are there, how much is the word finding difficulty, hesitancy, pauses, anomia, paraphasia, neologism, jargon, grammaticality or agrammatism, and the ratio of content word and function word. What is content word? Which carries information in language, the noun and verb and adjective and adverb. And what are the function words? The conjunctions and prepositions, which serve the function of a sentence formation but by themselves they don't carry in information. So in aphasia, these ratios are altered in different syndromes. And unless we encourage a patient to speak, either you ask him to tell any story or you show them a picture so that they are forced to speak something. So verbal expression is very important part. And even beyond verbal expression, or as a part of verbal expression, we have discourse or narrative. This is also very important in assessment of aphasia. These pictures were created by Subhash Nagar, a good friend of mine. And we show these pictures and ask the patient to tell the story. What is happening, what is likely to happen. This picture of 8 images have been created by Hiya Datta, an SLP from India who is now in US. And in this picture, there is a lady with the purse and a thief is coming and running and a man is saving. And we expect the person to tell the story. This is the normative data from a healthy person. And the words which have been put with the asterisk mark are known as content units. So the average score is 23. In a person with aphasia, this score would be less than 23. So this is the testing of a score for narrative discourse. And what do we count? Not only content unit, we look at syllables, we look at content units per minute or syllables per minute and many other aspects. The next heading is repetition and articulation. We ask the person to repeat vowels, consonants, words and sentences which can range from simple to complex, which can range from common to uncommon. And for example,
सामने जो पिक्चर रखा है इसमें आपको क्या क्या दिखाई पड़ा है वो सब डिस्क्राइब करिए.
So यहाँ एक पेस्कन पस्कन.
This is an example of jargon speech.
वेने के पेने. ठीक. ये छोटे छोटे दो है.
ये छोटे छोटे.
उसके बाद 1 2 3 4 5 6 ये थे.
ये क्या है?
4
और क्या दिख रहा है?
उसके बाद ये बेलक्रिन है. बेलक्रिन बहुत बढ़िया है.
No, Beckrin is a neologism.
उसके बाद ये सेंटर साइन.
Center sign is a unrelated semantic jargon.
ये वो ये 1 2 3 4 6 वो भी है. उसके बाद ये नीचे ग्रीन उसके उसके बाद एक ऊपर में वो बहुत पैकेट बेडल है इसमें.
Bedel is a neologism. So this is how you learn about the picture description. In case of repetition, we ask the person to repeat many of the stimuli and you must carry these stimuli either in a pocket diary or on your smartphone. The repetition will start from easy and common and short words to uncommon and difficult words which are difficult to pronounce, and it will go up to the sentences. So here is a video of repetition.
मेरे पीछे उसको दोहराना, रिपीट करना, ध्यान से सुनना. बोलिए. सरकार शत्रु को हारना पड़ा. वे कभी वापस नहीं आए. छुआछूत मानवता के प्रति एक गुनाह है.
So as the sentence becomes longer, the repetition would become difficult. Now all these tests have been validated on healthy control population and they were done successfully by 100% of my volunteers. These are the lists for dysarthria. For assessment of articulation, we use some tongue twisters in Hindi and English and other languages. While looking at the articulation and dysarthria, there is a classification. I will not go into the detail, depending on whether it is spastic or flaccid or a combination of spastic and flaccid, hypokinetic or hyperkinetic and ataxic. And the site of lesion can be upper motor neuron or lower motor neuron or a combination or basal ganglia or cerebellum. Next is the auditory comprehension. Auditory comprehension is tested at single word level, in which we ask the person to point to the pictures, objects. We give them commands and I will show you the examples. We will ask the patient, where is the tree? Where is the house? who is running, who is bathing, where is cycle, where is green color, where is triangle, and nobody should prompt the patient. And we expect the patient to put his finger. This is auditory comprehension at one word level. Or we will give them command, 1-step command, 2-step command, and 3-step command. And nobody should prompt. Nobody should show the gestures to help the patient. We can ask as a part of command comprehension some silly yes-no questions, like, does the lion eat grass? These are childish questions, but the person should understand that question and should simply say yes or no. We will tell a brief story of 3 or 4 sentences and a couple of questions based on that story. Or we can say these are the 4 sentences, which one belongs to which picture. Or here is 1 sentence and there are 4 pictures. This sentence matches with picture, sentence picture matching. This is a part of auditory comprehension. And this is a case of fluent aphasia. Again, another case of jargon.
झाड़
And poor auditory comprehension.
नहीं मैं नहीं पूछूं, जो मैं बोलिया वो बताओ. बताओ झाड़ है कि नहीं है, ढूंढो.
He is not understanding what is झाड़.
नहीं ये नहीं है.
दूसरा आदमी ये ताल सुधार.
नहीं झाड़ है कि नहीं इसमें. अच्छा चलो छोड़ो, झाड़ नहीं मिला है.
Now coming to the naming. For naming, we use the objects on the table in the room, or pictures, the person's own body parts, and other things. The same pictures which we use for auditory comprehension, now the role will be reversed. Instead of I asking where is cycle, I will put my finger on bicycle and ask him what is this. I will put my finger on circle and I will ask what is this. I will put my finger on the blue rectangle and I will ask what color is this. So then it becomes naming. If the patient is not able to do, we give him phonemic cue in which we give the initial sound, a semantic cue in which we give some description, or we can give him multiple options and see whether he is able to reject a wrong answer or accept the correct answer. We can give him written cue. So these are the cues which are given. So to save the time, I will omit this video. The reading comprehension, again, I will omit. We ask the patient to discriminate whether the words are similar or different in a pair. We ask the person to read aloud words and phrases beginning from simple to Kathin and sentences. We give them written commands or written yes-no questions. And there is a fill in the blank with multiple options while reading the sentences or reading the story and again answering the questions. And finally, we test the writing. We ask the person to write the name and address, ask him to copy the letters and sentences, to transliterate from one script to another, and to write a dictation. We speak the word and the patient should write those words and sentences and numerals. Or we show the same pictures to the patient and say, instead of speaking, you write down the description, whatever is going on here. And the next stage in the assessment of speech is pragmatics. Pragmatics is defined as the appropriate use of language, either to comprehend the ideas or to interact in social situations effectively. And it requires 3 types of knowledge: the linguistic knowledge, the knowledge about objects and events and actions surrounding you, and the social knowledge, in which situation I am and what normal behavior is expected from me. So for assessment of pragmatics, there are different test metrics that I am not covering today, but it is part of assessment of speech and language. Differential diagnosis of aphasia, you should pay attention to disorders of phonation which are arising from larynx, disorders of articulation without aphasia, disorders of fluency like stammering in childhood. So these are the differential diagnosis. There are situations where you can miss the diagnosis of aphasia even if it was present, like in a very mild case, or a very slowly evolving aphasia, or anomia. Anomia is often confused with amnesia. Alexia is often confused with visual impairment. Jargon is confused with psychosis. Receptive aphasia is confused with hearing impairment. So these are the differential diagnosis. The other way around differential diagnosis is we can make an error of false positive diagnosis. There is no aphasia, but we label it. All developmental disorders will have language problem. They are not aphasia. Aphasia is an acquired disorder. Stammering is not aphasia. Congenital deaf mutism is not aphasia. Pure dysarthria can occur in situations other than aphasia. Aphonia or a laryngeal disease. Regression of milestones in autism with speech and language impairment is not aphasia. Agnosia is because of posteriorly placed lesions. When a person fails to recognize an object, not only name it, is not aphasia. And there are functional disorders and hysterical or dissociative conditions. And of course, speech language assessment cannot be done in and should never be attempted in a person with altered sensorium. The classical aphasia syndromes have now become less important. People say that there is so much overlap, there is so poor clinical and radiological correlation that do not inform us well about the prognosis, neither they guide us in therapy. So the syndromic classification, which I enumerated in the beginning, is now going out of fashion. However, that doesn't mean that we have already some better alternative. We are passing through a transition phase, and what we say and what we recommend now, that you can still use the classical aphasia syndromes as an stem, and you expand upon that stem or a description. So you can say a Broca's aphasia with also mild affection of auditory comprehension, but somehow the repetition is slightly better preserved. So it is predominantly a Broca's aphasia, but there is a mild variation around the theme. So you should go for a description rather than merely pigeonholing or labeling. And the aphasia assessment is also done in cognitive neuropsychological model. This is something highly complex, not for an average clinician. It is for research purpose. And there are many types of box and arrow models. These box and arrow models tell how the cognitive function, including language, occurs from one step to another. And all these boxes and arrows may not correlate with the anatomical centers and anatomical fasciculi, but they are theoretical understandings and they are true. And it is possible to localize the lesion not in anatomy, but on one of the boxes and one of the arrows in a given patient after doing a detailed assessment. And nowadays, instead of aphasia syndrome, more and more research is being done on localizing the deficit in a given patient of aphasia on these box and arrow model, which are known as cognitive neuropsychological model of language. There is more to aphasia than the sum of its components. Of course, we have talked about linguistics. We have referred to cognitive functions other than language being affected. Of course, we have devoted all the time today for speech and communication and behavior and pragmatics. But what is not discussed today, but will be referred again to in the tomorrow's lecture, will be psychosocial issues. Mood and affect are depression, motivation or apathy, family support, education, goals, acceptance, and adaptations. Neuroimaging is also important, and there are great advances in structural neuroimaging and functional neuroimaging. In structural neuroimaging, you have volumetry and diffusion tensor imaging. There are many types of templates on which you write down in detail the structures involved, and neuroimaging is a great tool for research into language organization and recovery in persons with aphasia. This is my last slide. To recapitulate, aphasia is common but neglected with a huge treatment gap. There have been major divisions in anatomy and syndromic typology. The assessment is lengthy and tiresome but worth it. Briefer assessments can be and should be done by neurologists and internists. They should carry many picture stimuli in their smartphone and also keep a printed copy of a scoring sheet in which they can rapidly fill up the patient's response. They should make sure to cover all major steps in assessment, including verbal expression, auditory comprehension, repetition, naming, reading, writing, cognitive assessment, and psychosocial status. So thanks for your kind attention. So today we have covered the assessment and diagnosis, which forms the bedrock upon which the edifice of therapy and rehabilitation depends, and that we will talk tomorrow. Thank you very much. So we will welcome questions. I know many questions have already arrived, and our moderator, Dr. Nipun Puranik, will select the questions. Yes. Unmute your mic.
Thank you
doctor.
for such a nice, illustrious, lucid presentation on the topic. There are many questions pertaining to therapy which will be covered tomorrow. But as a stroke neurologist, I just want to add one thing, that whenever a patient of aphasia you're suspecting in window period, then you must reduce the size of examination or assessment of an aphasic patient, and you just should stick to whatever the points are there in NIHS scale, because in that way we'll be reducing the time and we will be sending the patient for the reperfusion therapy as soon as possible. So that is a point which I would like to make from my side. Many questions have come. I will be just focusing on those questions which are pertaining to the diagnosis of aphasia and differential diagnosis. I may not be able to take all the names, but Dr. Abhay Bhagwat sir from Indore is saying that is it precisely, can we precisely diagnose subcortical aphasia?
Subcortical?
Yeah.
Subcortical, yeah. Subcortical aphasias can be suspected, but on clinical grounds, they are difficult to differentiate, because any cortical aphasia, including Broca and Wernicke and conduction, if it is in a milder form, can resemble a subcortical aphasia. There are two main varieties, and I think Dr. Durjoy Lahiri would comment. He has already submitted a paper for neurology, Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology. Mainly we divide them into basal ganglia and thalamic. Usually these subcortical aphasia are mild. They tend to recover relatively fast, and it is argued that they mainly occur because the cortico-subcortical connections have been affected. And there was also a paper about 10-15 years back on functional neuroimaging which showed that in a structural neuroimaging the lesion was purely subcortical, but on functional neuroimaging there was hypometabolism of connected cortical areas. So what we call as subcortical aphasia are basically a combination of cortical and subcortical. And if Dr. Durjoy is here today, he can add a comment, or we can go to the next question.
Another question is, if the patient is having cerebellar ataxia, then can the patient also have aphasia? I think it's somewhat related to, again, the concept of subcortical aphasia.
No, cerebellum we don't include in subcortical aphasia. Cerebellum will not produce any aphasia, because aphasia by definition is a disorder of language. While cerebellum will produce a disorder of articulation, it will have scanning dysarthria or ataxic dysarthria. So we won't call it aphasia. Yes, next question.
Because I think my volume is, am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
So another question is, like, we know that the drugs we use in dementia like donepezil or amantadine, memantine, can they be used in aphasia, post-stroke aphasia? Can they be of some value?
This I will cover in tomorrow's lecture. It's a part of therapy and rehabilitation, but the short answer is they can be.
Okay. What is the prognosis of aphasia, which someone has asked that is there any difference in the prognosis of aphasia from a vascular cause or from, say, a traumatic brain injury? Is there any change?
Yes, traumatic brain injuries are also a very wide spectrum, and usually they have a slightly better prognosis than vascular aphasias, because there is no dense infarction. It is more of a contusion which is then replaced by gliosis. But there are islands of neural tissue surviving in a scar in an earlier area of contusion or hemorrhagic contusion. So usually they have a slightly better prognosis, but it depends on the extent of head injury. In a very severe head injury with lot of diffuse axonal injury, not only speech but all other cognitive functions are severely affected, and the recovery may not be good.
Someone has asked, can a severely aphasic patient have an effect on hearing? Hearing.
Please repeat the question.
If a patient is having aphasia, then can the patient have an effect on hearing? Can the hearing be reduced?
No, by aphasia alone, the hearing is not affected. What do we mean by hearing? By hearing, we mean the function up to the inner ear, cochlea, and the eighth nerve. Once the eighth nerve enters the brain stem and it reaches up to the cortex ascending in the brain stem, it is all hearing. There is only one condition related to aphasia which can resemble deafness, and it is called as pure word deafness. This is a subcortical aphasia in which the ascending lateral fasciculus, which is carrying the auditory information from both cochlear nuclei in the pons up to the Heschel's gyrus, the Wernicke's area, primary hearing cortex. If that association is broken, there is a dissociation, then these patients will not have Wernicke's aphasia, but they will have pure word deafness. These can resemble deafness, but they can be differentiated. They would be able to differentiate a sound of a bell, or sound of a mobile, or sound of a tuning fork, or a voice. They will not be able to get the linguistic component. Pure word deafness is the only thing in aphasic syndromes which can resemble deafness, otherwise not.
I think the other questions are mainly related to the therapy, so they can be covered tomorrow.
We welcome questions from the audience. They can unmute their mic, and we can have questions from them also.
Sir, they will not be able to talk to you directly.
Okay.
They are connected only through question and answers, which are given to Dr. Nipun Pauranik.
Okay.
Someone is, Dr. Parul Prasad has asked, can we diagnose aphasia in infants?
In infants, it is difficult to diagnose because you need a proper language function. So what type of linguistic component competence is developed in? Suppose the infant is a precocious one and up to the age of 1 year, he has some vocabulary, and if there is a damage to the speech area, there would be loss of auditory comprehension, and there would be loss of verbal expression in the form of variety of sounds that infant is producing. But as I said, a child's brain before the age of 7 or 8 years is equipotential. Even if there is a damage to one of the hemisphere, the other hemisphere will take over the function, and the aphasia would be short-lived and will recover well. So aphasia can occur in an infant. Its manifestations would be subtle, but theoretically it can occur. I have no personal experience.
Okay, and Kanika Chaudhary has asked, has it a standardized test, and does HAZIT differentially diagnose types of aphasia during bedside screening procedure?
HAZIT is a standardized test. Unfortunately, it has not been published. We have normative data on HAZIT. And of course, the ICMR tool, which is coming up as an adaptation of French aphasia screening test, is a rigorously standardized and validated test, which will be published. And it is basically a screening test whether aphasia is present or not, yes or no. If present, how severe, mild or moderate or severe from the score. And it can give you some hint whether it is a fluent aphasia or a non-fluent aphasia, but it cannot go into the details of the syndromes of aphasia, neither HAZIT nor FAST, that is French eye, and nor the ICMR test.
How can we distinguish between cerebellar mutism versus global aphasia?
Mutism can occur in severe cerebellar syndrome where articulation is so severe that instead of dysarthria, we call it anarthria. And anarthria can occur not only with cerebellum, but it can occur with brainstem disorders, including upper motor and lower motor neuron, either motor neuron disease, ALS, or big infarctions or encephalitis in the brainstem. And also at the thalamic, there can be mutism. So very severe Broca's aphasia and very severe global aphasia will have mutism. And to differentiate it from other varieties of mutism, there is one thing. is the auditory comprehension. Because aphasia, some degree of auditory comprehension will present, but in global even that will be gone. In Broca's aphasia, some degree of written expression might be present, but very minimal. In aphasic mutism, rest of the cognitive functions and alertness and orientation would be preserved, but in other conditions, the alertness, particularly in hypothalamic and subcortical lesions, it might be affected. In cerebellar mutism, the other signs of ataxia will be there. So these are some of the hints to differentiate the mutism from other causes and mutism. And of course, if mutism is a part of aphasia, then usually you would expect a hemiparesis or hemiplegia on the right side.
What should be the sequence of testing the various components in aphasia? Like someone has asked, should we test naming before we test auditory comprehension so that the patient does not get a cue?
There are no hard and fast rules, but different batteries, they have their own protocol. Naturally, once you start talking to the patient as a part of history, you have already started the aphasia examination, and what you are mainly focusing is verbal expression or fluency. So I think we can go ahead with the verbal expression as a part of history. Then we can go for the auditory comprehension, because that will give you an idea. Because if the auditory comprehension itself is very severely affected, then the other components like naming and repetition and discourse would be more difficult to test. So you have an idea. Like in motor system examination, first we do the motor and sensory, and then we go for reflexes. So similarly, apart from whatever verbal expression we have assessed, and with the picture description we have assessed, we should first test the auditory comprehension and then go for, of course, it is not hard and fast.
So in auditory comprehension, like how many pictures should be kept in front of the patient? What is the minimum number of pictures?
If you are following a standardized battery, including the FAST or French eye, or Boston Diagnostic Aphasia Examination, or Habit, which is the indoor brief variety, there are already given number, and they have to be there on your smartphone or in a hard copy printed form. You have to follow them. Whatever, of course, you can later on add and change the pictures, but then they would become non-standardized ad hoc batteries. If you are only doing non-standardized function, again, it depends how much time you want to devote. If you are devoting only a few minutes, less than 5 minutes, for auditory comprehension, you should choose about 5 or 6 pictures. This is just a ad hoc answer. You can choose 2 or 3 command comprehension, 2 or 3 yes/no questions, and 1 or 2 short story with story-based questions. So all aspects, the pointing to the word or object or body part, the yes/no question, the 2-step command comprehension, all aspects of auditory comprehension should be tested. It should not be restricted to only pictures 4 or 5.
I think most of the questions pertaining to the examination part of aphasia have been covered, and the rest questions related to therapy can be taken up tomorrow. So I would like to once again thank the organizers for this web session, and again like to thank Dad for the talk.
Okay, so my thanks to the organizers and to the moderator and to the audience. As a word of acknowledgement, which I will repeat tomorrow also, I acknowledge the help given by Indian Academy of Neurology in organizing an expert group meeting of experts in aphasia in July 2017, in which about 30 experts from neurology and speech language pathology and clinical psychology and linguistics and computer professionals came, and a paper based that was published in Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology. I also acknowledge my thanks to editor of Annals of Indian Academy of Neurology for permitting me to come out with a special supplement for aphasia, which is likely to come in next 4 months, in which we are getting good manuscripts for many contributors. So I think once again, I conclude from this part.
Thank you.
On behalf of Health and You, I wish to thank Dr. Puranik sir for such a lucid presentation on aphasia. No wonder that he started his slides with philosophy, and many of you must have seen his collection of books in IronCon, where enormous collection of books were showcased by Sir. So his interest in philosophy of medicine, and of course the mastery knowledge on the subject of aphasia was well illustrated here in this presentation. So sir, thank you very much for such a beautiful presentation. Sir, you have made a record. More than 1,251 doctors from across the country has attended this webinar.
Thank
So
you.
great, congratulations to you, and my thanks to Dr. Nipun for such a wonderful coordination with question and answers. Thank you very much, Dr. Nipun,
Thank you.
for this support. And I'm sure audience, the neurologists from across the country and physicians, you must have found the presentation very, very interesting and enlightening. We wish to thank all the doctors who have taken their time out from their busy schedule to attend this webinar. We request you to support our Health and You products, and thank you very much for taking care of all Indians during this COVID-19 crisis. Thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I would like to remind you to come back tomorrow at 4 p.m. because we have part 2 of this webinar on therapy and rehabilitation. So on this note, I would like to sign off on behalf of Health and You, always together.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.